Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer, Aunt Polly ordered him to paint a long and dreary fence. Tom hated it. He thought of it as drudgery that he cannot escape. But instead of complaining, Tom took the brush and, with a show of excitement, zeal, commitment, and focus, he started painting. Soon the neighborhood boys weren't laughing at him. They were begging him just for a chance to paint that fence. They even offered him bribes, their most prized possessions, marbles, a dead rat tied to a string. So what did Tom do? He did not change the fence. He did not change the task. He changed the story. And suddenly, everyone's perception, everyone's behavior, and the reality changed. That's the power of the narrative to change the reality. That's what big brands do. That's what advertising agencies are paid millions for. And that is what social media influencers are trying to master. For the last 36 years, I've seen the power of the narrative to change reputations or demolish reputations overnight, to create heroes overnight, and to also shake governments or tumble governments. All this on one side. People tend to think of journalists as powerful because we have access to exclusive information. We seem to be connected to people who are powerful, the celebrities and the VIPs. But the real power of a journalist comes from their ability to create perception and influence public opinion. They are able to reframe and change the context of any story by changing the focus, the details. And this is both a responsibility as well as a privilege. Tom Sawyer, of course, used storytelling in order to manipulate emotionally. But we as journalists tend to do that not just to transform and change, to co-opt and include, and also inspire and motivate. When we tell a story with empathy, we are able to change someone's reality. Ever so often, I've had to report on cases of people undergoing a huge amount of trauma, whether it is a sudden death of someone very close or survivors of sexual violence. Trauma tends to cause a lot of pain, guilt, shame, isolation, and that leads to silence. But when a person moves from being a passive victim of circumstances and moves to become an active agent, someone who breaks their silence and talks about their own painful personal experience as publicly relevant, they change trauma into testimony. These people start connecting with others and their isolation is reduced. I very often have found they become advocates of justice and change. And they're able to provide guidance and support to others, and somehow this becomes a healing process. Some of them at least, are able to see their own trauma, their own unnecessary suffering as something that has gained meaning now. They become empowered and also resilient. So when we change a frame, we restore dignity and change lives. Let me give you an example. We reported on a child bride, Sushila, who walked out of her own marriage. We reported on her not as a victim of circumstance, but as a brave young woman who was able to stand up for herself. She was honored with the National Award for Bravery in 2005. And she inspired many, many other young girls to stand up for themselves and revolt against child marriage. Survivor testimonies like these are very powerful tools. They serve a larger legal and social cause as well, because they help you to expose these kind of exploitative patterns of abuse, also to be able to challenge the kind of very entrenched myths, and also to question and bring to account perpetrators or negligent institutions. Let's move now to another kind of a very, very powerful testimony. Nick Vujicic. He's someone who is an Australian-American motivational speaker. He's celebrated, he travels around the world. And I met him 2 years ago. He was born with a condition called tetraamelia, which means that he has no arms or legs. For anyone, that would seem like a curse of a lifetime of despair, of despondency, and of dependency. Nick also faced challenges in his initial years. He was bullied at school, he battled depression, and had suicidal thoughts. But that was till he stopped looking at himself as someone who had these disabilities. He started focusing on what he had instead of what he did not. Doesn't mean that Nick denied his reality. He just reframed it. What everyone thought of, the world thought of as a tragic limitation, he turned it into his greatest asset, his USP. That doesn't mean that he marketed his disability. What he marketed was unconquerable hope. By choosing to see his own body as a testament to resilience, he changed the external perception. He shifted that external perception from pity to inspiration. Nick spoke to me about life without limits, about leading a ridiculously good life. Nick is married with 2 children. He swims, he surfs, he skydives. I came back impressed and hugely inspired as well. So Nick's life is proof that our reality is not defined so much by the facts that are handed to us or by the events that happen to us, but by the perception, the maya that we choose to build around these facts and around this very myth. Nick showed us that it is possible to reframe your reality and change your life. That is the maya, that is the magic. It is very important that we tell our stories to others. The stories that we tell to others is important. It matters. But the most powerful story is the one that we tell ourselves. Because the story you tell becomes the life you live. Very, very often, in fact all the time, I tend to use storytelling technique, the Tom Sawyer strategy in my life, both personal as well as professional. Some of you may tend to think that journalism is a glamorous profession, but it is also a profession in which you need to put in a lot of hard work. There is a lot of uncertainty, unpredictable hours of work. There is unrelenting deadlines. There is a lot of work that you do which exhausts you a lot, and the output may not be that much. And then there are also very hostile situations, conflict zones, cyclones, earthquakes, terror situations. When you are doing an undercover operation, the kind of risk. So how do you keep going on? How do you keep yourself motivated? You change the story. Instead of telling yourself, this is exhausting, this is dangerous, this is thankless, I tell myself, not everyone gets an opportunity to look at events as they unfold firsthand, witness history. Not everyone gets an opportunity to expose the corrupt, to hold power to account. Not everyone gets to do meaningful work that makes a difference to lives. When you tell yourself this, somehow you're able to get over the risk and effort. You tell yourself that the risk and effort is really worth it, and somehow magically you seem to rise above the immediate challenges, above the fatigue, above the fear, and about the doubt itself. What I've found is that it is only when you push yourself beyond the routine, it is only at that time that you find these amazing stories that can inspire you. Manjula is one such story. Her story has stayed with me. She was someone who was married at the age of 15. When she was 19 years old and pregnant with her second baby, her husband, a farmer, died by suicide, overwhelmed by a debt of about 5.9 lakh rupees. We told Manjula's story not as yet another farmer suicide death, a young widow, a victim, yet another statistic, but as someone who refuses to give up. When she was in her advanced stage of pregnancy, she literally went pillar to post trying to get help from the government. She failed, but she did not give up. She did farming, She stitched. She went on a two-wheeler, place to place, to buy and sell goods, all so that she could repay her debts and to be able to look after her children. NDTV's viewers came forward and said that they would help repay her debts. But Manjula saw in this an opportunity to do something more. She used part of that money to start an eco-friendly jute bag making unit. She repaid the first debt, took another debt of 6 lakh rupees, then another debt of 20 lakh rupees, and today she runs a workshop employing 30 women like herself and some men too. And I spoke to her to ask for permission to use her story, and she told me that come the new year, she is going to be employing 100 women like herself, and she's going to expand her unit in the new year. Manjula rewrote her destiny. Not just her own destiny, but she rewrote the destiny of 100 others. From an indebted, farm suicide widow, to an entrepreneur, to an employer, to a community leader. So if it is attitude that is going to determine or define your altitude, Purna Malawat exemplifies just that literally. She was 12 or 13 years old when I met her. She is the daughter of landless laborer from a very remote village, and she was studying in a government school, and as part of a government summer camp, she was given some exposure to rock climbing in order to boost confidence and in order to boost the personality of these young girls. When I met her there, Purna told me, I want to climb Mount Everest. I reported the story almost indulgently, that someone who belongs, a girl who belongs to the lowest strata of society, wants to go to the top of the world. Lo and behold, 8 months later, Purna became the youngest girl in the world and the youngest Indian at 13 years of age to climb Mount Everest. Purna couldn't have dared to do something so audacious unless she believed the story that she told herself, that it is possible for her to climb Mount Everest. I'd like to share here that Purna has hence climbed the toughest of mountain peaks on almost every continent. So what the stories of Sushila, Nick, Manjula, and Purna tell us is almost the same thing. You're the protagonist of your story, but you're also the writer. You have the power to change the narrative and change your story by choosing what details you will focus on. So start noticing the stories that you're telling yourself about your abilities, about your dreams, about your failures, about your relationships, and about your worth. When you tell yourself that I'm not good enough, the world quietly rearranges itself to confirm that. Let's say you're procrastinating on some important task, like studying for your board exams. You tell yourself, I'm lazy, I'm indisciplined, I don't know math, nothing ever works out for me, I will fail. This story gives you a lot of shame. This is a story that will give you frustration. It gives you avoidance. And all of that, the shame, the idea that you're not good enough, all of that will lead you to exactly the failure that you are afraid of and you wanted to avoid. And that becomes, in fact, a loop. You're stuck in a victim frame, and it's a blame frame that will lead you and trap you in victimhood. Now, the second one is the resilience frame. You tell yourself, I'm tired, I'm going to rest now, but I will come back to this with clarity. I will seek help for my math. I have done tough tasks before, I'm going to attempt this again. And the world rearranges itself, almost conspires to make this happen, to ensure and enable your success. There is something called the mirror effect. When you change your inside story, the perception of the world about you also changes. So, what are you waiting for? The brush is in your hand, the fence is right in front of you. Change the story, and you don't just change perception, you change possibility. Thank you.